Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Tuesday, the 21st of November. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 636 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition, and then I will take a look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. Russia has not used its Premier air-launched cruise missiles from its heavy bomber fleet for nearly 2 months, likely allowing it to build up a substantial stock of these weapons, the UK's Ministry of Defence has said in its latest intelligence update. Agence France-Presse is reporting that the German Defence Minister, Boris Pistorius, has arrived in Kyiv for an unannounced visit. He arrived by train and will hold talks with his Ukrainian counterpart, as well as with President Volodymyr Zelensky. 2 people were killed and 6 wounded in an overnight Russian missile attack and shelling in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. That's according to Ukrainian officials this afternoon. Missiles hit a hospital in the Donetsk town of Selidov and a coal mine, the Interior Minister Ihor Klimenko said. Ukraine has sacked 2 senior cyber defence officials, a government official said, as prosecutors announced an investigation into alleged embezzlement in the government's cybersecurity agency. Yuri Shchykol, the head of the State Service of Special Communications and Information Protection of Ukraine, and his deputy, Viktor Zhora, were both dismissed by the government. Ukrainian forces were engaged in containing increasing Russian attacks on Monday around the shattered eastern town of Bakhmut, which was seized by Moscow in May, military officials have said. Russia has barred entry to a number of officials from Moldova on Monday and complained about moves by its pro-European government to block Russian media outlets ahead of local elections this month. The moves were the latest in a series of acerbic exchanges between the two sides and allegations by Moldova that Russia has been exerting pressure on the ex-Soviet state's affairs and on President Maya Sandu's drive to join the EU. President Zelensky met the Fox Corporation chief executive Lachlan Murdoch in the Ukrainian capital in what Kyiv said yesterday was a very important signal of support at a time when global media attention has shifted away from the war in Ukraine. The media titan Rupert Murdoch's eldest son is a leading figure in media with a US Republican-leaning audience. His visit comes as concern in Ukraine mounts over the future of vital American military and economic aid, with the war with Russia showing no end in sight. Russia has placed a Ukrainian singer who won the 2016 Eurovision Song Contest on its wanted list, state news agencies reported yesterday. The reports said an Interior Ministry database listed the singer Susanna Jamaladinova, also known as Jamala, as being sought for violating a law adopted last year that banned spreading so-called fake information about the Russian military and the fighting in Ukraine. 2 people were killed early yesterday after Russian forces shelled a parking lot in the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson, authorities said. Regional prosecutors opened a war crimes investigation into the artillery strike, which injured 1 other person, the regional prosecutor's office confirmed. And an elderly woman was also killed and a man injured in a Russian artillery strike on the town of Nikopol in the central Dnipropetrovsk region, the regional governor said. And in Israel and Gaza, speaking about the ongoing hostage negotiations, the Qatar Foreign Ministry spokesperson Majed Al-Ansari said, "We are at the closest point we have ever been in reaching an agreement," adding that negotiations were at a critical and final stage. It is reported that the deal would involve a multi-day pause in hostilities and release of about 50 civilian hostages by Hamas, and the release of Palestinian women and children held in Israeli custody. Any agreement would mark the biggest hostage release and the first prisoner swap since the 7th October Hamas attack inside Israel. To date, just 4 of the estimated 240 people seized and abducted into Gaza have been returned to Israel. Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir issued a statement this morning warning against a deal. The Israeli Prime Minister said today progress was being made on the release of hostages held by Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and this morning the Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh said we are close to reaching a deal on a truce. Israel's Air Force has said on social media that in the last 24 hours it has struck approximately 250 Hamas terror targets. The Israeli military also issued a video of its troops in action within the Gaza Strip, claiming that Division 162 completed the encirclement of Jabalia tonight and is ready for the continuation of the attack. The Al Mayadeen news channel has accused Israel of a direct attack on its journalists after its correspondent Farah Omar and cameraman Rabi Mamari were killed today while working in the south of Lebanon near the UN-marked boundary with Israel. It was a direct attack. It was not by chance, AFP reports Ben Jiddo saying in an interview on the channel, and noting that it came after an Israeli government decision this month to block access to the website of Al Mayadeen. A World Health Organization spokesperson has said that 3 hospitals in Gaza had requested help with evacuating patients today and that planning had already started. James Elder, a spokesperson for UNICEF, the UN Children's Agency, has said there is a serious threat of a mass disease outbreak in besieged Gaza. He said, "It's a perfect storm for tragedy," saying that there is a desperate lack of water, fecal matter strewn across densely populated settlements, an unacceptable lack of latrines, and severe restraints on hand washing, personal hygiene, and cleaning. Avi Shoshan has left his position as a spokesperson for Tel Aviv's Ichilov Medical Center. He was responsible for organizing the press conference that presented exchanged hostage 85-year-old Yocheved Lifshitz to the media after her 16 days as a hostage in Gaza. The interview was criticized in Israel as a PR victory for Hamas after Lifshitz described what she was the care and gentleness from her captors after the initial violence of being abducted by Hamas, and she criticized the Israeli government and military. And in Germany today, authorities raided the homes of 17 people in the state of Bavaria, who are accused of spreading anti-Semitic hate speech and threats targeting Jews online. At Holyrood this afternoon, the Scottish Parliament has overwhelmingly passed a motion calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The First Minister opened the debate on a government motion which condemned the Hamas atrocities on the 7th of October, calls for the release of the hostages and for all parties to agree to an immediate ceasefire. The motion was the first time the Scottish Parliament has had the opportunity to vote for a ceasefire and follows the vote in the UK Parliament last week, in which Scottish Labour and Tory MPs voted against the SNP Gaza ceasefire motion. There was much more unity in the Scottish Parliament today as the Scottish Government accepted a Labour amendment before the Parliament voted for the call for an immediate ceasefire. Only the Scottish Conservatives voted against the motion. Earlier today, the First Minister Humza Yousaf wrote to the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, calling for the United Kingdom to officially recognise the State of Palestine to break the political impasse that has condemned Israelis and Palestinians to successive cycles of violence. The letter, sent ahead of a debate on the situation in the Middle East in the Scottish Parliament today, has also been sent to the Leader of the Opposition in the UK Parliament, Sir Keir Starmer. Scottish Greens External Affairs spokesperson Ross Greer MSP contrasted the vote in Holyrood today to what he referred as the cowardice in Westminster, where Tory and Labour MPs voted down calls for a halt to the violence. Mr Greer said, "Today the Scottish Parliament has made a powerful call for an end to Israel's relentless slaughter in Gaza and for humanity and peace. Every day that the bombing continues will leave hundreds more innocent civilians, including dozens of children, dead. There is a responsibility on every politician and every government with any kind of influence or voice to condemn these war crimes and to push for peace. It is a basic moral test that far too many have failed." Scotland's marine environment could be better protected, and new green jobs could be generated to help create stronger local economies and vibrant coastal communities, according to Our Marine Sector in an Independent Scotland, a new paper published by the Rural Affairs, Land Reform and Islands Secretary Barry Goodgen. This paper sets out the benefits of rejoining the EU for the marine sector and the industries and communities it supports, including regaining access to the EU single market for seafood products, enjoying the benefits of free movement, and negotiating an equitable share of EU funding. The Scottish Government could also negotiate for its own interests in international marine forums, especially for fishing, without reliance on the UK Government to do so on its behalf. It also highlights the opportunities for an independent Scotland to generate enough cheap, green electricity to power the economy, as well as supporting thousands of jobs for people in the offshore wind supply chain, make coastal and island communities more prosperous and encourage population growth, attracting more people to Scotland to live and to work. Ms Goodgen said, "This paper sets out in detail how independence and having an independent Scottish voice in Europe will benefit our vital Scottish marine sector, the people and businesses that work in it, and the coastal and island communities who depend on it. Our seas, coasts and islands are an important part of our national identity and way of life. Our marine industries and the rich and diverse marine environment many of them depend on play a critical role in creating and sustaining jobs and opportunities in our coastal and island communities and across the supply chain. Scotland is a proud maritime nation," she continued. "Scottish vessels account for over 60% of the value and tonnage of all landings by UK fishing vessels, and Scottish farmed Atlantic salmon is the UK's biggest single food export. Our marine sector also has significant potential, waiting to be unlocked to benefit our people, communities, economy and environment. But that potential can only be realised with the full powers of independence, giving the sector the support it needs and the prioritisation it deserves. The marine economy currently faces many challenges, many arising from Brexit, which has adversely impacted on Scotland's coastal and island communities, businesses and industries. We lost freedom of movement and got new barriers to seafood trade. It also meant the loss of fishing opportunities for parts of Scotland's fleet. An independent Scotland could rejoin the EU, gaining access to the biggest single market in the world and reclaiming those benefits. The Scottish Government believes that independence is an opportunity to address the current challenges and to put the future of Scotland's seas in Scotland's hands." People with mobility and mental health problems will be asked to work from home or lose their benefits, as part of what a UK Government minister described today as doing their duty. The policy will be set out tomorrow as part of the autumn statement, amid a drive by Rishi Sunak to make changes to the welfare system, which he described on Monday as unsustainable. Hundreds of thousands of people will be told to look for work that they can do from home, or face their having their benefits cut by £4,680 a year under the UK Government plans. Speaking to Sky News, Laura Trott, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said, "Of course there should be support for people to help them into work, but ultimately there is a duty on citizens. If they are able to go out to work, they should. Those who can work and contribute should contribute." Sarah White, the head of policy at the national disability charity Sense, said, "Everyone should be able to work if they want to and can, but this latest government move looks set to punish disabled people, adding more anxiety onto disabled households that are already struggling." Details of the policy will be set out by the Department for Work and Pensions after consultations by the government some months ago about work capability assessments. Trott also went further than Sunak or Jeremy Hunt when asked if the autumn statement would go beyond business tax cuts. Asked if the Chancellor would be cutting taxes for individuals, she told the Today programme that is where the focus is. Charities have already warned that the DWP plans to tighten health-related benefits, which are provided to more than 3 million working-age adults in the UK, could cause huge anxiety and mean sanctions against disabled people. Campaigners have also said that the welfare changes could lead to many losing out on almost £400 a month in support. Tony Wilson, the director of the Institute for Employment Studies, told The Guardian in September that extra support to help disabled people into work should not come with such stringent conditions. The number of people on health-related benefits has risen by a quarter since the eve of the COVID pandemic. Most of those are in limited capability for work-related activity, the LCWRA group, and they receive the additional £390.06 a month. Dave Ramsden, a deputy governor of the Bank of England, has said that the outcome of the Brexit vote and years of political uncertainty it triggered has had a chilling impact on business investment in the UK. The bank's deputy governor for markets and banking said the fallout from the 2016 referendum had chilled investment levels compared with other leading nations and had contributed to a lower speed limit for the UK economy. He said it was hard not to conclude that the decision taken to leave the EU has chilled business investment. Speaking to MPs on the Commons Treasury Committee, his comments come as the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says he is preparing to use tomorrow's autumn statement to focus on growing business investment in the UK. Mr Ramsden said the key driver for economic growth, business investment, was now only 6% higher in real terms than in the second quarter of 2016, when the Brexit referendum was held. That is less than 1% increase a year, and compared to US business investment, which has gone up by over 25% in the same period. Mr Ramsden said you can see a break in the trend for UK business investment in 2016. It had been going up since the global financial crisis, and then it flattened off from 2016 onwards. He suggested weaker levels of investment had contributed to holding back the productive capacity of the UK economy. We therefore think the speed limit the UK can grow at without triggering inflation is lower, he said. Yesterday, Jeremy Hunt told company bosses at a conference held by the CBI lobby group that he planned to unveil a whole range of measures designed to unlock business investment as the cornerstone of his growth plans. The UK has historically lagged behind other leading economies for growth in business investment, but has fallen further back in recent years after a period of political and economic instability amid the Brexit vote, COVID pandemic, and repeated flip-flopping of government business policies. Answering questions from MPs before the autumn statement, Andrew Bailey, the Bank of England's governor, warned against expectations for a rapid fall in UK inflation to pave the way for interest rate cuts. He warned that financial markets were underestimating the risk of inflation persisting at higher levels than anticipated. Excuse me. The High Court in London has ruled that two protesters were reasonable in calling Ian Duncan Smith Tory scum outside the annual Conservative Party conference. In rejecting an attempt to overturn the acquittal, Lord Justice Popplewell and Justice Fordham said no fault in law was made by a senior district judge last November in finding that Ruth Wood, 52, and Radical Haslam, 30, not guilty of using threatening, abusive, or insulting words, or of behaviour with intent. In response to a request for a judicial review by the Director for Public Prosecutions, the High Court found that Judge Goldspring, who is also described as a chief magistrate, had made the important finding that the use of Tory scum was to highlight the policies of Ian Duncan Smith, and that this was relevant to the reasonableness of the conduct in relation to the rights of freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. There was nothing to undermine Goldspring's conclusion that criminalising the words Tory scum would be a disproportionate interference in the two protesters' rights, the High Court ruled. Tom Wainwright, a barrister at Garden Court Chambers who represented Wood and Haslam, said the judgment represented an important defence of the right to freedom of expression. He said, "What this judgment confirms is that it is not for the defence to show that, but it is for the state to show that there is a good reason to restrict free speech and that a conviction isn't the only way that could be done. Wood and Haslam were outside the Midland Hotel in Manchester, where the Tory party annual conference was taking place in October 2021, when Duncan Smith, the former welfare secretary, emerged to walk to the Mercure Hotel for a conference about Brexit. He was accompanied by his wife Betsy and her friend Primrose York. Haslam and Wood had followed Duncan Smith from a short distance. They separately called him Tory scum. Wood added, "Fuck off out of Manchester." Wood defended her comments on the grounds that her job working with homeless people in her local community meant that she felt very strongly about the impact that Conservative Party policies were having on people's lives. Haslam's comments were made in a speech in which he cited child poverty, homelessness, and a lack of action over the climate emergency as reasons why people hate you, why people call you scum. He added, "It doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from what you have done to ordinary people's lives. Shame on you, Tory scum." Their comments came after Labour's deputy leader, Angela Rayner, had been recorded at her party's conference describing the Conservatives as homophobic, racist, misogynistic scum. The High Court ruled that the defence needed to set out the facts for a reasonable conduct defence in relation to freedom of expression and assembly rights in the European Convention on Human Rights, but that it had been up to the prosecution to demonstrate the proportionality of an interference with those rights, which the prosecution had not done. 3 prominent US legal thinkers have announced a new organisation to champion conservative legal theory within the rule of law to fight the threat of a second Donald Trump term. "Our country comes first," the 3 wrote in the New York Times, "and our country is in a constitutional emergency, if not a constitutional crisis. We all must act accordingly, especially us lawyers." The authors were George Conway, an attorney formerly married to Kellyanne Conway, Trump's White House counselor, J. Michael Luttig, a retired judge and advisor to Trump's Vice President Mike Pence, who became a prominent January 6 witness, and Barbara Comstock, a former Republican congresswoman from Virginia. The authors also rebuked prominent right-wing groups, including the Federalist Society, for not resisting the former president and his authoritarian ambitions. Their new group, called the Society for the Rule of Law Institute, would work to inspire young legal talent, focus on building a large body of scholarship to counteract the new orthodoxy of anti-constitutional and anti-democratic law, and to marshal principled voices to speak out against the endless stream of falsehoods and authoritarian legal theories propagated almost daily, they said. The Federalist Society and its chair, Leonard Leo, played a key role in Trump's judicial appointments, installing 3 hardliners in the Supreme Court who helped hand down right-wing wins, including removing abortion rights and loosening laws on gun control, affirmative action, voting rights, and other progressive priorities. Conway, Luttig, and Comstock emerged among prominent conservative opponents of Trump, warning of his authoritarian threat before and after January 6th, when the rioters attacked Congress in an attempt to block Joe Biden's 2020 election win. 91 criminal charges and assorted civil threats notwithstanding, Trump is now the clear front-runner for the Republican presidential nomination, while polling strongly against Biden in battleground states. American democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law are the righteous causes of our times, and the nation's legal profession is obligated to support them, Conway, Luttig, and Comstock wrote. But the acquiescence of the larger conservative legal movement, these pillars of our system of governance, are increasingly in peril. The dangers will only grow should Donald Trump be returned to the White House next November. The Scottish Government has published a consultation seeking views on how citizens, businesses and the water industry needs to adapt to the growing impacts of the climate emergency on essential drinking water, wastewater and drainage services. Views are sought from consumers and businesses about how water and wastewater services are provided in the future, regardless of whether they are connected to public mains and sewers or not. Climate change is impacting the availability and quality of water used for drinking, whilst intense periods of rain are leading to increased urban flooding, and the public is being asked for their views on the adaptation of Scotland's water and wastewater services to address the impacts of climate change. Views are being sought on how Scotland could respond to the impacts through measures such as reducing water use, increasing storage and managing rainwater to protect the environment, economy and public health. The Net Zero Secretary, Barry McCallan, said, "Scotland is not immune from the impacts of climate change. In 2023 alone, we have experienced times of drought and storm. That's why we are taking action now, for example, through investing £42 million per year, as well as an extra £150 million over the course of this Parliament to manage our flood risks. But we know there is more to do, and the Climate Change Committee has made clear that Scotland needs to work harder and faster to adapt to climate change. Unless we take steps to adapt, more than half of Scotland's population will be at risk of water scarcity by 2050 during very dry periods. Storms like Agnes, Babette and Kieran have had a devastating impact on communities this year. Events like these will happen more often, and if we don't take action, leading to further flooding of communities, damage to properties, and our vital water and wastewater infrastructure. She continued, "As such, I must adapt. We must adapt. I urge everyone to read the consultation and to consider what we need to do as a society to adapt to the growing impacts of the climate emergency on drinking water, wastewater, and drainage services. Your views are important," she said, "and will inform our proposals for legislation." And female charity workers who supported vulnerable women throughout and beyond the pandemic experienced high levels of psychological distress, a new study has found. Researchers conducted 135 interviews with women across the UK who worked for community-based third sector organisations, who delivered services, support and advocacy to women and girls who were experiencing poverty, domestic abuse, homelessness, or who were socially isolated and disadvantaged in other ways. The study's findings show women working in these kinds of services experienced trauma, exhaustion, depression, and anxiety related to the nature of the work, but which were further exacerbated by high workloads and concerns about job security and funding. The research report, which is called "Women Working to Support Women in the Welfare Sphere, Psychosocial Challenges," was funded by the Nuffield Foundation and completed by researchers from the Scottish Centre for Crime and Justice Research at the University of Glasgow and the University of Cambridge. Co-author of the research, Professor Michelle Berman of the University of Glasgow, said, "Women workers told us about how the pandemic and lockdowns led to an increased need for their services by women who were presenting with ever more complex needs. To respond to these increasing and multi-layered needs within the context of the pandemic, organisations had to significantly change the way they provided support by moving away from in-person contact, by setting up telephone helplines, holding meetings online, or even installing chatbots on their websites. However, this also left professionals feeling isolated and unsupported because they couldn't see their colleagues on a day-to-day basis, and anxious because of a lack of face-to-face contact with those they supported. All of this change at a time when many other existing workers and support fell away created a considerable emotional toll on these workers who were left to fill in the gaps. And that is all that we have for you this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland depends on the generosity of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station, and to make new programmes for you. Our programmes will always be free to view, but if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Our need to reach our £30,000 target to pay our bills is still pressing. Due to the generosity of our supporters, we have raised nearly £21,000. However, our need to raise the remaining £9,000 is really urgent. To everyone who has donated and everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment as a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter and Blue Sky at Broadcast Scot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. We will be back at the same time tomorrow evening for the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please come and join us then. And I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's been watching this evening. On this day in 1918, the German High Seas Fleet surrendered to the Royal Navy's Grand Fleet in the Firth of Forth. You can see some of the paintings of James Patterson depicting those events in Scotland's National Portrait Gallery. Please look after yourselves and please have a very peaceful evening. Bye-bye.